So in preparation for this event, I actually went and did a little research on what science fiction is. And some of the things that I got was science fiction is a genre of fiction dealing with imaginary, but more or less plausible, or at least non-supernatural content, such as future settings, futuristic science, technology, space travels, aliens, and paranormal abilities. I also found author Mark Siglass wrote, "Science fiction is like the definition of pornography. You don't know what it is, but you know it when you see it." So on that note, I'd like to ask our panelists to give us a little bit idea what, in their mind, is science fiction and why they got into it. So if we can start with, can we start with you guys?
Maybe Mark.
Mark.
You're the guy, the sci-fi guy.
The one thing I would say, because my father-in-law is a huge science fiction guy, and he always says there is no science fiction anymore. What I grew up with watching on Star Trek, those are the cell phones now. So I think science fiction is just what is possible. And now some of it is literally becoming possible, but it's what you can imagine, what is possible to imagine with your mind. That's science fiction.
Okay. Mark, you'd like to?
Just for me, it was. I'm a Twilight Zone kid. That's my. That's where I learned about science fiction, and what it meant to me was essentially what the series did so well was taking human drama and adding in one little ounce of something impossible or something out of this reality, but really woven through a real human story and a real character and a real drama, and so I always liked that. I know Serling had said it, and all the shows really celebrated that, and Stephen King had in this great book Danse Macabre had kind of reiterated that it was the grounding of reality with one thing askew is what that's the sci-fi that really works for me is where it's 95% reality and 5% what, and that is the balance that it's something out of reality, whether it's science, whether it's alternate worlds, whether it's aliens, it's something gone awry in a very familiar setting.
I'm George Clayton Johnson. For me, science fiction and fantasy, because they blur, is in response to the fact that the art form of the age is realism. The literati of the East Coast have said so. Realism, John Steinbeck, William Faulkner, James T. Farrell, name all the great writers, and they have all been striving for this thing called realism. And then along came my friend Theodore Sturgeon, who showed that in that area he was an exemplar, said that for him a story needed a touch of strange. A touch of strange. Realism, yes, but it must have just a little note of the imaginary, which makes both of these gentlemen absolutely right. It's a story that contains an imaginary element. After I sold All of Us Are Dying, which became The Four of Us Are Dying, to Rod Serling, which was my first story sale to television, the fact that he bought it put me on a permanent search for the imaginary. What is imaginary? There's really trite imaginary, a train that can talk. No kidding, the train talks. Blah, blah. Who cares? You know, that's not cell phones yet. That's a long way from cell phones. So, but the truth is that the covers of those lurid magazines of my youth depicted the freeways of Los Angeles with the bullet cars whirling along above everybody's head and helicopters in the sky. Only they were more silent in those movies than they are in my neighborhood. So, a touch of strange, yes. Realism, yes. But there's also this business about science fiction in that it's often social commentary. It seeks to change the future by depicting the future. In 1984, maybe we won't go there if we show what it's like. You know, in Logan's Run, what if they do decide to start to limit our births and ultimately decide when we will die? And if they, whoever they are, decide that's going to happen, then is that plausible, to use another word? Does that fit in with things? Does that make sense? If you'll give me another 2 or 3 minutes, I want to say a special thing. Back in the Middle Ages, 14th, 15th centuries, if you were a well-supplied person, a moneyed landowner, and you had a son or a daughter, a son especially, and you wanted to send them to the university, and you knew they had standards there, they won't take anybody in the university unless they know what's going on. Well, how can we determine how these lunkhead farm boys know what's going on? So they hired teachers to teach what they called the trivium. Trivium was 3 things. Grammar. Now you've all picked up grammar from all the intense reading you've done. You see how people give themselves away by their vernacular, how they show you their station in life and their expectations of themselves by the way they talk. Well, after a while you begin to understand the elements of language, which are pretty much the same in all languages, fit together so that there does have to be a verb in the thing if you've got a noun. And so after a while you get to know that stuff intuitively in modern society. But in those days, there was no opportunity to learn that unless you could already read. So reading, writing, and arithmetic became the world of the frontier, the little red schoolhouse. But that wasn't built to teach people how to think. It was to just to acculturate them. Because that guy was a Swede, that guy was a Wop, and that guy was a Spick. How the hell could they get together? How could they learn how they all lived or worked together? But they did through the agency of the children. Get the children hobnobbing together, the children take the other children into their own homes. People aren't suspicious of the little kid who spies on everything and tells his parents just how they cook the fish kebab or whatever. And so, back to grammar, the second element was logic. Now, nothing like studying stories will teach you as much about logic as that. Things got to fit together. Things got to make sense. Things have got to be foreshadowed. Things surprising you too quickly seem contrived. And yet, my God, there's this thing called accidents, when things just happen. They just happen to happen for no explicable or understandable reason. What is that? From cause to effect. After a while, you get a handle on the subject called logic. And the third one was rhetoric. Rhetoric is how you present yourself. It's what kind of arguments you make to persuade people to do what you say. It's the figure that you cut. It's your face for the world to see. It's the presentation of self in ordinary life. This right here is giving us a chance to deal with this subject matter called rhetoric. But those 3 things made a young gentleman. Freddie Bartholomew could talk to adults with a ringing tone in his voice because he had learned the trivium before he got involved in Captains Courageous. We see that in movies, we learn how they think. Now, I have a lot to say about the current business that you guys are in, but basically my information comes from the 60s, because you get burnt out in this business. After a while, you don't want to do another episodic TV show. It isn't that you can't do it, you can, but it's lost its luster. You've done that. You've won that prize. You've proven to yourself you can do that. After a while, you get tired of that, and you move on to other things.
So this is Jimmy Diggs. He's written 9 episodes of Star Trek. So I guess that's a perfect person to follow through on the episodic television.
For me, science fiction is, the best science fiction has got something to do with how some maybe it doesn't even have to be big. Maybe some small piece of technology takes your central character and tears his heart out. It's about how things impact humans and how humans interact with things and their lives are changed. I mean, we just lost Steve Jobs recently, and we've seen how the devices that he manufactured impacted our lives, all of our lives, and made us all dance on the head of a pin. You know, our lives have been changed by the science fiction that dwelt between his ears, and that became our fact. We all remember the little answering machines we used to have in our homes, with the little red light that blinked on when you had a message. One day I was coming home from a pitch at Paramount, and it was late at night, and my wife was working at the airlines, and I told her, look, hon, I've got to rent a car, don't bother driving. She was on a lot of medication at the time. I said, you know, I'll pick you up, and I'll take you home. Just leave the car there, I'll come back and get it in the morning. But she's very impatient. No, I don't want to wait for you. You know, I'm going home, I'm tired, right? So I get home first, and she's not there. And I'm wondering, where is she? What's going on? So I walk into the house, and there's that device with a little red light blinking. And it's 3 in the morning. Already, I'm not on the head of the pin yet, but I'm getting there. So I go to this little arcade device, and I turn it on, and what I hear is the sound of an EMT. And he's saying, Mrs. Diggs, can you hear me? Are you okay? And I can hear sirens in the background. I can hear other fire personnel talking. And I say, and I hear someone, check her out, make sure she's not bleeding. Now I'm dancing on the head of a pin. This little stinking device with this red light is tearing my heart out. I don't know where she is. I'm trying to figure out where is she. Can I pick up some clues from the background conversation so I can get in my damn car and find out where my wife is, if she's still alive? I'm listening, I'm picking up clues, I'm starting to narrow down in my mind where she might be based on the sounds coming through the speaker, based on clue words that's coming from the EMT, and then finally, So I run out of the apartment complex. And just as I get downstairs and I'm trying to fumble with the keys to get in the car, a CHP pulls up and goes, are you Mr. Diggs? So yeah, it says, don't worry, your wife is okay. She fell asleep at the wheel and she ran into a light pole. Okay, light pole snapped off at the base, fell back down on top of the car. There was a seagull asleep on top of the thing. He died without even opening up his wings. He's laying there in the road, feet up. You know, that's how hard she hit that pole, you know? But, that's Lynette, not a scratch. Not a scratch. But she's, you know, the car is toast, you know what I mean? And I should be mad, right? But in that character arc, I should be mad because she should have waited for me to pick her up. I went from frustrated that she wouldn't let me pick her up, to absolutely horrified that she might be dead, to totally relieved and forgiving that she was all right. And I was taken on that hellacious roller coaster ride because of this little piece of fucked up arcade technology with a blinking red light on the top. That's science fiction.
Great answers. I did get a chance to really think about this question when I was scared shitless having to pitch my ideas to David Fincher about this comic book called Black Hole. And in that comic book, it takes place in high school in 1974. There's a sexually transmitted disease that kids are spreading that gives you animal-like deformities. And as kids begin to show, they have to go live in the woods, that they drop out of society. It's a really beautiful book. It's super evocative, and everyone who reads it becomes sort of obsessed with it, but it's also very hard to translate into film. And so in thinking about this problem, I realized that the thing that made Black Hole so great is that it actually, that's how high school felt, right? That by elevating the reality to this crazy place, the emotional reality was actually precise. It was absolutely the way I remember high school feeling. That's how everyone responded to it. And so by creating these impossible stakes, that's how life really feels. It actually feels like when you're walking into that meeting with David Fincher that you have to go fight an alien or something. Like those stakes are the stakes that we actually have in our hearts, I think. And so that's one of the great things that science fiction can do, is it can, I think, open us up to a bigger truth about how life really feels. So.
I guess Dante's the perfect person for me to lay it out a little bit, because you're adapting Isaac Asimov's Foundation, right? And there's a quote by a physicist named Gregory Benford. He said, "Science fiction is perhaps the defining genre of the 20th century, although its conquering armies are still camped outside the Rome of the literary citadels." Because what's happening, I guess, is that it's finally reaching its, with Star Wars and everything, you really saw that the science fiction went from being a literary thing that you had to be really creative or educated to sort of understand what lasers, what are they talking about, to really now you're seeing it. You're like, yeah, lasers, yeah, sure. I mean, who doesn't understand lasers now and shooting people with it? But before it was sort of a weird concept to understand. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that with filmmaking, the science fiction is reaching a whole other level of audience that perhaps it would have never reached before. When Jules Verne and H.G. Wells were writing their books, it reached a certain amount of people, but not the masses that way it's reaching now. Do you guys want to talk a little bit about that? How?
I just want to ask one. Did I hear you right? You're adapting Isaac Asimov's Foundation series for...
Yeah.
God, I hate you. That is
If you want to switch places at any point, you may be able to arrange that, but no, it's actually really fun, and I'm super, super lucky to be on it right now.
That's fantastic. Congratulations.
Yeah, you want to talk a little bit about the project, or can you talk about it?
Well, I'm in the middle of working on it, and I hate to talk about things while I'm working on them, and plus, God only knows what Roland would think if he saw something like this. But that actually, it's funny, when I came into that project, they already had a screenplay, and I sort of heard about kind of where they were at, and I hadn't read any Asimov in a really, really long time, and my knee-jerk reaction was just, I think about how the world is ending pretty much all the time, and I said, well, this is a story about how there's some people who know that the world's going to end, and they have to run off and build some sort of utopia, and a bunch of barbarians are going to try to stop them, and that was the only way I could navigate 3,500 pages of sort of encyclopedia entries, which is what those books are, and that's how I'm still trying to navigate it. But when I think about it like that, I'm like, oh yeah, no, that's a story that I'm engaged in. We're all engaged in.
Can I ask you one more question? One of the things I loved about Asimov's fantastic work, this one particular, that he never actually described a space battle through the eyes of the person in the battle. It was always third person through somebody who had been through the battle and then was explaining it. Are you going to do it that way?
Oh no.
Because I thought that was, because I could just imagine, this guy sitting there telling the story, and you're just seeing the horror of what he's experienced, and you don't show not one spaceship, not one explosion. You just have the guy tell it, and you just feel it, and oh.
Yeah. Well, now you make it sound awesome. So maybe I'll try that.
And did you say Roland Emmerich?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm available to play the mule or Harry Seldon.
Okay.
That was kind of inside.
It's made your job tougher.
So did we answer some of the question, or what was the?
Yeah, it's interesting what Jimmy just said, because that's really what it is. You would write these books, and you'd have sort of an artifice of how to describe it, and it would be somebody sort of talking about it. But nowadays, yeah, you want a 10-foot story monster. You just made a digital monster, make it happen so everybody can see it, and how that really changes the writing, that you can't sort of lay back on literature, and just you have to actually show stuff. And I guess that's a whole different type of writing. Yeah.
What I was going to say, though, too, part of, you had mentioned earlier, popular culture now has accepted science fiction and fantasy in a way that I think has never existed before. And part of that is not only because of film and TV, but I also think it's part of the video game culture. Mm-hmm. That's something that I grew up in, and those worlds are par for the course. That's the common ground between the two. And now video games are as popular and generate as much revenue as movies. So as that continues to expand, people like me that grew up playing video games, I'll watch movies about sci-fi and fantasy until I'm dead. You know, so I think that's why it's become more and more accepted, and I think it's going to continue to grow, and it won't be like the old MGM musicals where it has its heyday and then goes away. I think there's an appetite that is there that will always be there, but the challenge is, what I think, at least on the feature side, they do a better job on TV, is that how many of these stories can you bring to screen? How many of these stories are there to tell? And that's the challenge. But I do think that it's a genre that's here to stay.
Yeah.
And I just very quickly want to add to that, the beauty of sci-fi is that it allows you to be as creative and as imaginative as you can be, you know, but there aren't parameters per se. I remember the first time I had seen Star Wars and I had seen Alien, and I'm like, wow, you can really do that. You can really create that world if you have it in you to be that imaginative. So I think that's a beautiful thing as a writer, to be able to really just let yourself, you know, drift and daydream and really try to use your imagination and create a world. Who says you can't create a world far, far, you know, away, or whatever it may be? And to me, that's something that's very, very exciting, and that's what I, you know, love about science fiction. And I agree with Charlie. I do think it is here to stay, without a doubt.
I guess more than ever, you know, the idea that you guys are trying to create programming that is really innovative and imaginary is so important. Especially now, this year, 2011, there was, I think, 28 remakes, sequels, prequels, you know, between the Pirates of the Caribbean and Shrek and all of them coming out. It's a slew of films that are just getting regurgitated. So it's really great to see stuff like Isaac Asimov's work starting to come out. And how do you guys feel about this? I mean, it must be, because all you guys have been working in the industry. How do you battle this sort of like, hey, let's do the same thing but a little bit different, as opposed to like, hey, let's recreate, let's make something different?
They always say in the business, make it uniquely familiar, which we always get a kick out of. But Charlie and I, the way we approach it, we always ask ourselves, okay, what haven't we seen before? And that's a challenge, because now, you know, so many films have been produced, but it always starts with, well, okay, what haven't we seen before? And then it's a matter of, is there a character that we love? Is there an idea that we want to explore? And you do what they call reverse engineer. You're like, well, if that's the case, if you ask that question, well, then how does it play out? We personally like writing, you know, original pieces. We like to take something that's in the zeitgeist and maybe spin it, if at all possible. And it is a challenge. It is always a challenge, you know, to ask yourself, what haven't we seen before, and come up with something that's fresh.
And the one thing I would add, though, is that, you know, mankind has existed for thousands of years, but if you really think of it emotionally, we haven't evolved that much. We're, you know, just like 2,000 years ago, people loved each other, they hated each other, they went to war, they tried to fix problems. That's all the same, and I think almost everyone appears touched upon that. It always has to be about the human story, the personal story, the conflict that, you know, the person in the story is dealing with. Then you get to have the fun of Immortals. For us is about an atheist who becomes a believer, who becomes a martyr. You know, then there's all this other window dressing of spectacle and gods and titans and death. You know, but that's what that story's about. End of story. That's why we wrote it. You know, so it's kind of coupling the two. You know, but as far as on the feature side, the studios are making less movies, and they're all moving towards making tent poles. So what we always try and do, listen, we're not a toy company. We don't own the rights to anything. You know, you have to take things that are out in the zeitgeist and try and spin them. That's what we've tried, but you can always, there's, you know, everyone has their own approach and their own take.
And from now on, I'm going to have this gentleman answer for me. It's such a good job.
Yeah, well, no, I you know, part of it is business reality, because we're all, you know, we spend time doing original stuff, but a lot of what funnels through the studio and the stuff that has a good chance of being made is stuff that has, you know, Terry Rossio was here last time and said, you know, things with mental real estate that had it was planted in everyone's consciousness already, and therefore had a huge set of, it was advanced down the process so much because this is something that would be much easier for a studio to make that has a relationship with everybody on planet Earth. Everybody knows this character. So part of the remake and the rehash and all, there's we find ourselves in a lot of situations where we're ending up with considering those projects. But what we try to do is use that as because there are so many expectations attached to something, you can use that completely to recreate it because everyone's got it pegged about what it is, and you can use that as a way to do something entirely original. But you have this platform to stand on that allows you to not have to start from scratch and push this boulder all the way up the hill to get people even to the threshold of giving a crap. With stuff that's got worldwide recognizable franchise characters, whatever, you can start at a much, and life is short. You want to get some of these things made, you want to get some of these things done. So sometimes the challenge, we write an original script every 6 months, and still a huge pile, can't get arrested. They're all pretty good, but it's so hard to get those into the very small pipeline now. So sometimes you want to work on something that's going to have a shot, and some of those bigger studio projects are things that exist. So I think the remake thing is out of control, the reboot, the whole thing, and we're working on one now, so it's kind of weird for me to be saying that. But the challenge was, can you take something known and people love it, people hate it, whatever, just completely blow it up and do something entirely different, because that becomes the writing challenge for the assignment, is can you blow everybody's mind because they expected X, and you broadside them with something entirely different. So so some of it is taking the gigs that are available and trying to make them awesome. But my heart is definitely with the blank page and the original idea and seeing where you can take something. So but it is a business, and there are certain trends that, they'll all swing back. I mean, they always do. The reboot thing will eventually kind of the way the superhero thing, everything kind of has its moment, takes a few years off and then comes back. So I think you got to really think long term in this, and everybody up here is saying human stories, the human condition that doesn't change at all, really, by minuscule amounts, but how you're framing that human condition is what never changes, and that's what you got to remember all this is about. Forget trends, forget trying to chase a trend. It's always too late when you get there. So think about what you care about, and science fiction is just another way of expressing what you care about.
After I just gave up writing TV, I sat with William F. Nolan, good friend, and decided, with his help, to write a novel. And the novel was Logan's Run. Now, Logan's Run is being remade as a big budget film. And by Christmas of next year, it'll be on the street. And they'll probably spend $250 million on it, counting the advertising. And then, in order to capitalize upon the DVD or the download, they'll spend another $50 million. They got Ryan Gosling to play Logan. They've got Nicholas Refn to direct. They did Drive together. They've lined all these marbles up so that a poor scriptwriter cannot complain. Because Bill and I own the novel, and there's a novel tie-in certainly in the future, and an illustrated book, and redone in every foreign country, and made global, and downloaded on the infamous cell phone. So, now I look at Logan's Run in terms of, we were facing similar problems back in the 60s and 70s as today, where the human condition was concerned, and where history was concerned. Because Logan's Run is Tarzan and Jane. Logan's Run is every woman and man who've been put into an unreal, Wilma and Buck Rogers, Flash Gordon and his good old mate. The game was always a guy and a girl a chapter about the guy and then a chapter about the girl. And the father of all of this was Edgar Rice Burroughs with Tarzan and Jane. So we said, let's write Tarzan and Jane. Now they said, what about the story? Well, death is the best story I know. Scares the piss out of me. I refuse to even consider the idea. I haven't even worked out a strategy to avoid it because I'm immortal. So anyway, death. Okay. Well, death at a given age. What if the government told you when to die? What if it was a law? We said, well, how young? How old? I talked to a veteran screenwriter who was part of the Hollywood 10 named Edward Hitch, and we were thinking of making it 40. Life begins at 40, death begins at 40. But he said no, younger the better. 21. Make it so goddamn absurd that people would elect to be able to live to the prime of their lives, and then before they start to deteriorate, they die. What is wrong with that? So we started threshing an idea around, trying to find out how to make it into, well, what's another exciting thing? Getting away. God, I love stories about getting away. I love hiding from the authorities and letting them run past and laughing up my sleeve. That is just delicious. So we started gathering together. What we were thinking of as lumber. Started looking at all the old models. Come up with an idea. Oh no, Bill, that's corny. Yes, but it's the golden corn. People love it. Well, of course it's old. If it wasn't good, it wouldn't be old. You know? So, as a result of all of this gathering together, in a period of 21 days, we wrote a book. We wrote it in a motel room. We wrote it at top speed. We wrote it with 2 typewriters. We plotted as we went. We drew Logan's path on a big piece of cardboard. It's an incredible piece of art. I have it at home. And we came to terms with who knows more about science fiction, you or me. And let's give it to each other with the bark off and not hate each other this time. Okay? And after a while, we worked out a system where we could be truly critical of each other and drag our feet and procrastinate and do different trips in which the 2 of us tried to figure a way to go forward. After a while, we were raising our voices. After a while, Bill shushes me and says, it's too early, George. We got too damn long to go. We got to find a better way to do this. And so we quieted our rhetoric down. We pitched to each other till hell wouldn't have it about why our idea was better than his idea. And along the way, we started inventing adversary characters. Box. Why call him Box, George? Because he's a fucking robot. He's a box. You know? Whale. Why call him Whale? Because he's covered with blubber, for God's sake. He's the fattest guy around. You know? So, anyway, back and forth we went. And we ended up with a book. And we took it to an agent. The agent said, cut this out and this out and this out, which we dutifully did and retyped it, gave it to the agent. And the strategy was to offer it to 5 companies at once, but all of them literary companies, the Grove Press, you know. So we ended up selling the book. They ended up printing 1,500 hardcover copies. If we'd have sold it to Ace Books, we would have got $1,500. So that, I think, is what we got for this book. Anyway, it was peanuts. But we were happy because we placed it in a market where it would be compared to Brave New World and a bunch of other sci-fi classics that dealt with death, that dealt with with man versus the technological society. I mean, now, how do you get away when the cops have got the cell phones too? And how the hell does government function at all when people know more about what's going on than they do? You know, more current events are flowing past every citizen here than any of our lawmakers experience in a year, unless they're on the damned internet, unless they're playing games. and involving themselves in what they call the social network. Okay, now it's a global affair. It's pulling us all faster together. It's made I mean, where did we go from here? Talk about science fiction. If this does start to collapse, I was born in 1929, the year of the stock market crash. I'm what is called a depression baby. I don't buy toys, I don't buy tools, I don't buy clothing. I am very frugal in my needs. I'm basically a vegetarian. I can live off the fat of the land because there's always enough left over for me. I've never ever worried about money. I've always wanted to do the best job I could. I wanted my work to outlive me. I did not want to make disposable stuff. And that is why, even though I was offered a fortune, I can't write any of the crap that I see on TV. NCIS, CSI. What are they preparing us for? There's an autopsy in every show. Every show, we have to see the dead and the dying and be faced with some terrible goddamn thing which we have to look at through a goddamn microscope. And all of the work is signed by the same guy. And I wonder, doesn't this guy ever leave his house? For God's sake, the world is full of fascinating stuff. I could think of 1,000 goddamn shows in a year if I was paid for it. And every one of them would be fresh and new. You should see the stuff that's in my trunk that I'll unload when Logan's Run gets really rolling. And the spotlight gets on me. My agent gets in a position of power over the situation. I just recently hired Andy Rigrod. I don't know if this is instructive or not. Andy is the guy that worked for George Lucas when George decided to challenge 20th Century Fox over the merchandising rights to Star Wars. And because of Andy, George won. So now George opened the light and power company of his, made a number of movies with the money that was left over, is still wealthy as hell from that goddamn deal. It's the biggest merchandising thing that has ever damned happened. Logan's Run came out under its shadow and couldn't sell anything when it was done as a movie, and it's a pretty decent movie. I would give it 2.5 stars. Now they got a chance to do better than that. They got the money to do it, they got the people to do it, they got the need to do it, and they're making the decision to do it. And I'm sitting around waiting for a moment when my Andy Rigrod can go in there and start talking about what truly do they own that's in that very seminal novel, because it's stole from everybody. Logan's Run is a theft from everybody, I'm freely confessing. I'm a forger. Give me anybody's style. Let me read 3 pages of their writing, and I can write the 4th page. It may not be their 4th page, but it'll be in their lumber, it'll talk in their vernacular, it'll catch their tone of voice, it'll have the right level of insistence about it, because I can write anything. I've written contracts, proposals, scripts, stories, essays, articles, poems. Go down the list of literary formats. I've worked in them. Consider myself to be a wordsmith, basically. I give myself a PhD in literature. I've read almost everything there is to read that's ancient or old or known. I can trick people into believing I read the rest of it. What am I saying? I'm saying you make a living without having a job. How in the hell is that? That's what we do. I don't have a job, I get a gig. As soon as I'm over this gig, if anybody's been bad to me, I go back and talk to them about it. Meanwhile, yes sir, no sir, 3 bags full. Yes, I follow orders. Yes, I gotta take that out of the script. I'll find something more incendiary to put in. The more you make me take out, the more dangerous this goddamn piece is gonna get. You're messing with somebody who will pull the fucking pin. Because I really don't care about the money. The money will come. I care about the credit. I want a good credit. After a while, you become creditable. Because, look, my first credit was Frank Sinatra, Ocean's 11. The heyday of the glittering Sin City. My second credit was me pathetically begging, in a noble way of course, Ray Bradbury to let me take one of his more poetic short stories and adapt it into a semi-animated cartoon, art film, and to get Joseph Magnani, Promotus Art Institute, to illustrate it, and to get it made by Format Films, and to get it nominated for an Academy Award. Second credit. Third credit was I sold a story to Rod Serling for The Twilight Zone. He adapted it. I sold another story to him. I sold the third story. He called me up to tell me that the networks wouldn't pay, or his sponsor actually, would not pay for this. It depicted a man who gets his hand cut off and then miraculously regrows his hand. But he's worried because he knows that the hand is regrowing a man, and there's only room for one of them, according to the plan. And Rod Serling bought this story. And then he called me 2 weeks later, after I had spent all the money. He said, they won't use it. I have no bloody use for it whatsoever if I can't make it into a show. And so, would you buy it back? And I valued the relationship so much, I said instantly, yeah, Rod, sure, I'll have a check in the mail. I went to a loan company and borrowed the money and mailed it to Rod so that I bought back that short story, but it opened the door for another story. But when they bought the third story, I said, ha ha, you want it, but you can't have it unless you let me write a first draft screenplay. If at the first draft, you can cut me off, or you can continue to let me develop the script. But I gotta have that or I won't give it to you. And they said, well then, too bad. And I said, well then, my heart falling to the floor, too bad. But within a week, I got a phone call from an attorney named Jerry Saltzman. Jerry said to me, we have prepared here a check for you to buy the story. We've prepared an option for a first draft screenplay that we can exercise, and forthwith we exercise that option. So you're hired to write a script, and anyway, the money between the two offers was minuscule, but it allowed me, I think I made $1,200 out of that sale totally, of A Penny for Your Thoughts, starring, what's his name? Dick York. And ironically enough, my agent right now is trying to peddle something called A Penny for Your Thoughts, about a magic penny that if you have it, you have the power of telepathy. You can hear what people are thinking. And every person reacts differently to it. And it's a wonderful half-hour, not very expensive, chance to use guest stars, continuing storyline, etc., etc. It's got all of the elements to make a real successful little show. But that was my third credit. Penny for Your Thoughts. You know. So, from then, of course, I had to go upward. I had to find a way to succeed beyond that. But if I hadn't written a bunch of Twilight Zones, Gene Roddenberry would not have come looking for me when he got his Star Trek show go, and then I would not have gotten the opportunity to write one of the first half dozen shows they filmed. They had the Corbomite Maneuver, they had The Enemy Within, they had Charlie X, they had a flock of good shows, but they also had The Man Trap. And then it was taken out of Gene and Herbert Solo of Desilu's hands because it went to the network, and the network was promoting the show because it was full of color, and color TV had just been invented, and they were trying to sell TV sets, and they wanted a show that would be brightly lit and beautifully colored. And so when the network brass at NBC decided which show to air the week before the show opened, because The Fugitive was playing its last episode back then, the brass went to The Fugitive, bought that hour back, reached into the pile and took The Man Trap out and put it in there a week before the show opened, so that people expecting to see The Fugitive would be knocked out by the fact that what the hell is this? And the guy with the ears and all of that, you know, it's kids stuff, for God's sake. My, what a goddamn joke. Is the network's gone crazy? Those were the responses to The Man Trap. I did not feel too buoyant for a while until I realized that that was exactly the response that they wanted. They wanted everybody to say, this is new. Interplanetary thing. JFK calling for us to get into space, and he's talking about going to the moon. And here we go, interplanetary travel. Warp speed, you know. I wrote another story for Star Trek later on. The producer, Gene Kuhn, wanted me to change it. I told him it was dumb, what his idea, what he wanted to change. He said, well, your idea, George, is fantasy. And I said, your fucking show is fantasy. What are the scientific principles on which the transporter is based? Come on. This is all made up. I couldn't persuade him. It was a personal thing, I think. I must have rubbed him the wrong way or something. But anyway, I'll pass this thing on because I could monopolize this.
What was the original question?
I guess we were talking about when you have 28 remakes being made, how hard do you have to work to do something original and different, and what are the pleasures and the benefits of also working with material that has been developed and has a worldwide following and actually is easier to get through the pipeline?
I really enjoyed playing in the Star Trek sandpit, you know. But now I'm trying to do my own thing. And I'm running into battles that I never dreamed I'd have to fight. I'm trying to make the transition to feature films. I just optioned my first feature film. And because basically it's like starting all over again for movies, I'm a nobody. My name isn't gonna put butts in the seats. So, you know, every step along the way, there's an incredible learning curve here, and getting the director that I've got, I'm fortunate I got an A-list director, getting some talent to look at it. I mean, at one point I actually had Samuel L. Jackson say yeah to the thing, you know, but that kind of fell apart, and Vin Diesel said yeah, and that fell apart. And I'm fighting all kinds of other battles I never fought. And I'm looking at the business plan, and I'm wondering, why in God's name am I hunted to not be like this business plan? I'm a writer. You know, why am I, you know, what's all this foreign market crap and pre-sales and, you know, 12 revenue streams, and, you know, I got to do 2.5 times the domestic box office, or I'm going to be considered a failure, you know. Can't afford Vin Diesel now, so I got to look at Gerard Butler, you know. So, but I'm convinced, you know, and take it for what it's worth. I haven't done this yet. It's not completed, but I am convinced that there are many ways to make movies as there are movies, and I really don't care about somebody telling me, well, this is the way Hollywood does it, because every time I listen to somebody else tell me about how it was supposed to be done, and I listened to them, I ran into a failure. And when I basically told, maybe not to their face, but, you know, kiss my ass, I'm doing what I'm gonna do, then I would have success. Then I ended up having victory. You know, the one day, I mean, they used to tell me at Star Trek all the time what kind of stories they wanted to hear about, and stories they, you know, don't bring this in, you know, don't pitch the same story to us twice, you know. And I listened to them, and man, things dried up. Like 6 months, I hadn't made a sale. I just got pissed, and I said, you know, screw it. You know, I'm going to tell my stories the way I want to tell them, and I don't. Choke it up.
That's good advice. Yeah.
I don't care if it's my last day at Paramount. So I went in and I told my stories. God, what am I kidding? I told my stories the way I wanted to tell them. And that afternoon, afternoon, I was sitting at the kiosk at the fountain thinking it was all over. It's 3 in the afternoon, it's a beautiful day in Los Angeles. And I said, well, it's been a good run. You know, I started out as a security guard and sold some episodes to Star Trek. And then the writers came down, Brandon Braga shook my hand and said, 3 of your stories went up for final approval this afternoon. And one of those stories that they bought became the most popular episode that I ever wrote, Dr. Bashir, I presume, for Deep Space Nine. And so now I'm doing the same thing with movies, you know? I got people telling me, you can't do this, you can't do that. Well, you know, if I listen to that kind of stuff, theoretically, a science fiction writer in Hollywood should be over 50 years old, black, and built like a linebacker. So, you know, going by that, you know, I'd already be a failure if I listened to people and what their preconceived notions of what I'm supposed to be able to do are. So, yeah, I've never done this before, but I'm gonna put this business plan together. I'm gonna beat the feat for this angel investor. And I'm happy to say that this Wednesday, I've never gotten this far, but for this Wednesday, I'm gonna have a conversation with the money guy. And I'm convinced that even though I've never done this before, I'm gonna find a way to make it happen.
Pretty awesome question. I really liked a few things that Mark said too about, you know, you look for those chances where you think everyone's going to get a chance to make a movie that they want to, and sometimes that can be something like a sequel because you want that security from the studio where they're like, oh, we know what this is, we have a clear picture, so we're not going to get in there and sort of noodle with it and mess with it. And so some of the greatest work that's, like, I think being made is actually being in those kinds of margins. And because I think that the pressure on the studios and on the studio executives to make things that they can rationalize to everyone in the chain is greater than ever for a variety of reasons. And the thing that really strikes me about the struggle to make things right now, because, you know, it's a wonderfully volatile time, and it's really great to hear that you're like pursuing other means, because I think District 9 is one of my favorite science fiction films that's been made, and I don't know when. And it was interesting because when I saw that film, I said, well, this is the movie that every time I talk to an executive, we both are talking about, we want to make this movie. And everyone would admit that that movie would never fucking get made at a studio in the normal studio way. And thinking about that is what led me to do a spec script for All You Need Is Kill. And that's had an interesting and crazy life. But in this process, I started thinking about how I think people go see movies because they want to see something they've not seen before. And that's at direct odds with the very reasonable urge on the part of an executive to, I have to make sure this is going to actually sell, and so it has to resemble everything that has already been made. But to me, in a sort of macro-ecological way, I look at a film like The Matrix, and it makes good money, great. But it also, I believe that people go see 100 more movies in hopes of seeing another Matrix. And so really, it's those movies, it's those disruptive films that are why anyone goes to see the fucking movies. And those are the ones that are truly, truly different. And if we're in a point where the industry can no longer make those films, then we're in super trouble. But at the same time, there are a lot of great, weird exceptions. I mean, Inception, that was quite a crazy movie, and it couldn't have been made by, Adam Moore, studio. But yeah, it's an interesting time because there's a lot of people trying to make movies in different ways, and because the cost of special effects, the cost of making the films is coming down, I really do believe that the next Star Wars is going to come out of someone who's working with an MRC or with an Indian paintbrush, one of these companies that can have sort of studio level money, but are not as driven by the desire to fabricate the same old stuff, which is, you know, I don't want to knock that too bad, because there is a reason why the studios make their choices.
And if anyone knows the story of Plato's Cave, that was a story thought of by some Greek guy thousands of years ago, and it exactly is what The Matrix is. So there's no new stories, but you steal and you pick and you take what you can, and you create your own new thing.
That's a perfect thing coming from the Greeks and the, you know, it's all the Greeks.
It's always about
So I guess I'll just, you know, since you're bringing it up, how do you go from being the lollipop love dancer on the Onion movie to writing the Immortals? I mean,
you know what?
I don't remember the lollipop.
No, I don't know.
Well, I mean, you're credited in the IMDb working on the Onion movie for some reason. I actually looked at the Onion movie; it's hilarious.
Yeah.
Anyway, but how do you guys land the Immortals?
I'll tell you how Immortals came about. It was a short story that I'd written in college, the genesis of it, and the first script that we had sold to a studio was a heist film. And so we found out at Warner Brothers they were remaking Clash of the Titans, which we always loved. Mm-hmm. So we told our agent, you know, can you put us up for this? And they go, well, you guys have never written anything like this. You guys have only written heist movies. You guys are from Jersey with gangsters, and you know, they're not gonna. But I'm like, we're Greek. We spent every summer growing up in Greece. Our grandmother used to tell us all these stories, you know. And they said, no, they won't even hear a take from you guys. So I basically took this short story that I had written in college, and I told him, and my brother always said, that's a movie. And so then the idea of that is just something you just think up. Someone says, like, well, what is this based off of something? It's like, no, dude, we're writers. You think of things. You make stuff up. That's what you do, you know? And it was our own kind of creation story of the world. And so then we just took that and we said, you know what? We had an offer for a paying job. And we said, no, we're not going to take that. We want to just sit down, and for the next 6 months, we're going to write this story. And it's what you believe in and the stories that matter to you that make the difference. And that's why people hire you, for your voice, for your sensibilities. You know, Olivier used to say, as an actor, you play 3 shades of yourself. Well, as a writer, what you believe, who you are, that DNA comes through. And so you have to write those stories. And I think that's important. But then you also have to be cognizant of, and I don't want to make it seem like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, the studios make less movies. They want high concept, big tentpole things. So you just have to find a way to merge the two, because that's the easier target to hit, especially when you're just starting out. You know, if you write the, you know, suicidal ballet movie, that better be the best suicidal ballet movie there is. You know, but if you can figure out a way to write a great end of the world movie, that'll be easier to sell. The execution doesn't have to be as perfect. So it's just a way of finding what's important to you and trying to fit it into, you know, a bigger thing, or just write the small thing too. You know, I always think those are the best ones. So, but it's harder in the reality that, you know, being Greek, my good friend, you know, who's Greek, owns a, you know, burger restaurant. He's always like, why are there so many bad movies? Why do they all suck? And I tell him, listen, the majority of movie tickets are bought by 14 to 32-year-old men. And they buy 60 to 70% of the tickets, and that's what they want to see. If someone came into your restaurant and all they wanted was hamburgers, 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 you don't try and push a steak on them. But that doesn't mean you don't try and make the best hamburger you can make, but that's what people are buying. And so, you know, you do have to be aware of that, but then there are no rules in this business. There are no rules.
Also, too, some of these answers have been amazing, and your heartfelt answer was very moving. And what I just want to add to that, I think passion goes a long way. And I think if you're very passionate about whatever story you want to tell, somehow, as long as you don't give up, it finds its way to hopefully getting made. You know, Charlie mentioned that initially we turned down a job to write Immortals, and that's true. And along the way, there were many pitfalls, and it seemed oftentimes where the project was going to die for all different reasons. But we were always very passionate in the story. We really believed in it. And it just took on a life of its own. I think that if you're truly passionate about what you're writing, at some point, as long as you don't give up, that story does take on a life of its own. And then before we knew it, you know, Henry Cavill, who was a no-name actor at that time, got cast as Superman. And then all of these stars started aligning, and it's tracking very well. And it feels as if it's really taking a life of its own. So I guess in a roundabout way, what I'm saying is just don't give up. If you're very passionate about something and you believe it, and you believe it so much like it's in your bones, don't listen to what anyone else has to say. Really, go at it. Don't be deterred, and fight the good fight.
Is there any other? Yeah, it's really good. Do you guys want to give any other advice for writers? I mean, there's people in the audience that have written stuff, and then there's people that are just trying to break in. Is there any other advice that you guys can give?
I'd like to say something. Hold on, I'll give this back. Take this one. First of all, I really feel honored to be sitting with this group of people because they echo my sentiments entirely, which follows Ray Bradbury's dictum, do what you love. If you love that kind of a story, go write that kind of a story. Don't worry about whether the audience will like it. The audience are sheep led to the slaughter. They do not know what is good, and they have very short memories. I'm serious. You guys
Tell us what you really think.
Associate with each other, and so you think your drive or ambition or talent or whatever it is that is your motivator, you think that it's common because you're in a room full of people who share it. But you go out and distribute yourself amongst the population and see how many miles that circle around you in your house has to be before it encounters 2, 3 of these people. Because getting them together in this room is a major accomplishment. And I'm not only talking about the ones who have credits, God bless them, but those who are going to have credits because they listened to people like this talk who are saying to you, go for excellence, go for novelty, follow your dreams. Don't listen to the best advice because 85% of us are brain dead. No, I seriously mean it, that we have been turned into consumers because there's obviously a they, and you may call it the Illuminati and give it romantic overtones, or it just may be media and big business conspiring to destroy us. But they've done it. The banks, my God, I watched this assault, this gathering of people around the banks as they try to figure out what in the hell are they pissed off about? Slowly, they're evolving a philosophy of them and the banks, and the whole idea of money, and this whole idea of trillions of dollars of our wealth and what we were thinking of as retirement cash that suddenly turned into petty change. Now, I'm glad to see that. When I watched it happen in Egypt, I was totally dumbfounded. But this new communication device, I will tell you what my ambition is, and it may inspire you to think deeper. I wrote a script for the Twilight Zone called Kick the Can. Those who recognize it will understand that it basically is a story about an old folks' home and a couple of people in this old folks' home who are friends, and one of the friends gets this idea that he grew old when he stopped playing children's games, and that must be the secret, that attitude that you have when you think that way, and he thinks he can become young again and somehow defeat death. Now, that script belongs to me, lock, stock, and barrel. I'm going to adapt that script into basically what it is, a little one-act play. I'm going to get some actors in a dark room, I'm going to light it with LED lights, and I'm going to shoot it with cell phones. I'm going to not use any sets. I'm going to let the story carry your attention, and meanwhile, you'll be studying big faces of real excellent actors doing their art, which is letting the story play out upon their faces. And I'll bet you it'll be as fascinating as the Blair Witch Project, and it'll cost a little less than $70. The point is, you're not tied down by studios anymore. We were. We had 3 or 4 or 5 marketplaces. You've got thousands. I'm not sure that I could make it as a scriptwriter in today's world, because I would have to demolish myself a couple of times in front of a couple of important people in order to make them realize they're fucking idiots. That anybody with any sense laughs at them. For example, editing has become so simple, so easy. Everybody can do it, so the editors all go crazy. And you can never see a shot that lasts more than a split second, and they think they're communicating deep wisdom when all they're doing is showing us confusion. The sound effects in these scripts, every bloody one of them is terrible. There's a huge swishing, a rocket goes off, a motorcycle takes off. Why? Because we've come to the end of the act, and they don't know what else to do. Why? It's too easy to do, and as a result, they've all become sloppy, and the art of it is completely lost. To my eyes, it all happens in the movies, when you can rest lovingly upon a still figure and let him talk for a while and absolutely fascinate the audience. All of the rules you think you learn by watching TV about the way it's done, they're all wrong. They're all created by people who haven't an ounce of curiosity. Look at any news show. The lady will say, an octopus ate a whaler vessel in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, news at 11, and goes on and has no, what in the hell is that about the octopus? You know, not a moment of it. We're all accepting of the status quo, and the status quo is leading us over the edge of a cliff. And the more you learn to think with a touch of strange, add a little element of fantasy to your life somehow, even if it's only believing that you're going to live forever.
I love the fact that this panel, every time somebody speaks, everybody claps. It's so inspirational, you know.
Get the signs back again.
So I guess at this point, I'd maybe like to open it up for questions from the audience. Yeah.
I had a question of how much the setting plays into the character's arc. Like, for example, you have Batman in The Dark Knight. He's kind of like a darker character, and then you have Gotham City. Or in Iron Man, you have Tony Stark, and he's kind of surrounded by technology. How does the setting really play into the character's arc, and how important is it?
So how the setting plays into the character arc and how important that is.
I think we all try to see it as another aspect of character, where you know, in movies everything has to be sort of firing on the same cylinders and telling the same story. So I think I sort of don't look at it as a separate element. I think of what setting is that character in, and how does it tell the story for you. Everything. I mean, we found out with Cowboys and Aliens this summer, if you're not like, if people are not emotionally attached to the story, they notice things like setting and logic and you know, all sorts of the mechanics of storytelling. If they're on an emotional journey with you, Iron Man has so many plot flaws, so many holes, so many things we worried about, so many things that we felt totally derail the story and are going to tear them out of the experience because it doesn't make sense. They were with you emotionally, all that shit goes away. No one cares about, you know, we were answering questions no one was answering, like, you know, how does a guy get to a battle, you know, in Afghanistan, you know, when you know, shit, we just saw him in his living room and then he saw some bad stuff on TV and then he just shows up. I mean, he can't just show up. And for the editor said he's got a flying suit. Of course he can just show up. You know, you don't need to explain how he got halfway across the world and does he have to stop for the bathroom, like any of this stuff. Just, so I guess it's not really answering your question, except in the roundabout way to say if you have a character with an emotional journey, the setting is playing into that character, all the elements of the story are playing, but if you have the emotion, everything else is forgiven in a sense. Just do that right and everything else takes care of itself. Do that wrong and I don't care what you do, you're dead in the water. So really think about, like all these guys have said today too, character, human drama. It's something that we've all cared about since the beginning of time. That struggle covers everything.
I concur with what the gentleman just said. with a little addition to it. It depends a great deal about setting. It can be all important. Logan's Run will be all setting. The whole story will be told by the circumstances and the situation and the kinds of things that they're doing. They won't bother to explain them, no more than Gene Roddenberry tried to explain the transporter. He just let you see it happen, let you jump to your own conclusions. Now, that's on the one hand. On the other hand, you take this kick the can thing. I'd like to shoot it against a totally black background. I'd like to light it so that 50% of the screen was dead black and 50% of it was hot white, and there was hardly any stippling or shading in between. I'd like to tell it all in extreme close-up. I'd like you to imagine that it's taking place in an old folks' home, and in the original, the replication of the old folks' home on the MGM backlot was very pleasing, and it added a lot to the belief in the story. But if you do have a good story, a set of relationships, a conclusion, a decent argument, a decent amount of jeopardy, all the elements that go to make up a story, setting becomes pretty trivial in most cases. It's really largely unimportant. It's interesting to know how to stage something, but you can do it with invisible furniture. You know, that's a chair. Put a stool there. You know, it doesn't, because we're more interested in what's going on between the people in that kind of a drama. So the real thing is, it's a whole new setting of rules. Nothing, like the man said, there's no rule about it, about anything. I tell you one rule I would follow. I would like people to learn how to speak the English language so that I can understand it. I watch the weather lady and the news lady and the traffic lady on the damn network news shows, and they are so stylized. They're more so interested in standing a certain way and presenting a certain figure than they are in the words that they're speaking. They slur the words, they lend them a cold, brassy, metallic sound. There is no reality or total belief in anything that's being said. Everything is a part of the story, no complete story on network news at all. Not with a beginning and a middle and an end. It will always follow later. And the film and TV, I watch it. I'm a nut for it. Me and my wife spend hours and hours and hours watching this trash. And to that extent, they're successful in that they capture my attention, because the lighting and the production and the development of everything, the casting sometimes is totally ingenious. Sometimes it's so wonderful, except it's so fucking boring, the story. And I've seen that story 87 times before, and I don't want to see it anymore. So if I were you guys, I would try to think in terms of inventing this. You got a network, you got an internet now. You got a small screen you can literally carry around on your wrist. You got the ability to look at a postcard instead of a big screen. It's a whole different game. How do you tell a story? A human being like myself, I don't calculate how animated or expressive I'm going to be when I'm trying to explain something. I just do it. I try to capture attention. I try to focus my language. I try to get to the point. I try to seek out what are they interested in. I flail around sometimes like a fool, but in each case, I'm trying to create me. Here's what all these people have to say to you. I'll say it about me, but it's about them. I am unique. I know now, after having lived 82 years, that there's no one on earth who can do my act. Nobody could play me on the screen and get away with it. I am unique. I think differently. I am always scheming. There's a song about it. He was, in his mind, he was always winning. Well, that's me. I'm always winning. So, but also, well, pretending the danger is not real. What a wonderful art form that is. You're facing foreclosure. The landlord is coming tomorrow. You're going to tell this guy, take it and stick it. And you know that's going to bring about a terrible problem. But pretend the danger is not real. I do that all of the time. But anyway, the point really is the uniqueness of it. Each one of you, see the self-making of the self. You see Humphrey Bogart, the way he lights a cigarette. Next time you light a cigarette, you're unconsciously imitating if you're a hero worshiper like me. I'm a hero worshiper. Starts with Columbus or Odysseus or somebody, but it ends up with Humphrey Bogart and Robert Mitchum. And I've got a picture show out there circulating right now, a script. And what it is, it's the third Humphrey Bogart, Lauren Bacall picture. There was The Big Sleep, there was The Have and Have Not, and there's Heinrich Hate. When I sell Heinrich Hate and everybody sees what the hell I've done, they won't really realize that all I'm doing is try to capture the kind of intricacy of storytelling and the relationships that one finds in a Humphrey Bogart, Lauren Bacall picture.
As a writer, I can't believe I'm going to say what I'm about to say about setting. I recently directed a little short thing on YouTube, and at that point, and please don't, buy dolls and stick pins in me. I really started to kind of compartmentalize the job of the director with the job of the writer in a different way. And to me, it's the job of the director to bring more to the party for the writer. And so if I'm really writing something that's truthful and rings with verisimilitude, then I'm going to let the director worry about the setting. God, I can't believe I said that. And one of the reasons why I'm saying that is because there's this Twilight Zone episode, I don't know, you might have wrote it, where it's just a big round room. And in the big round room, there's a clown and a cowboy and a general and a ballerina, and that's it. A big round room, and they're trying to figure out where the hell they are. And then they're trying to figure out how to get out of the big round room. And then we find out at the end of this thing that their toys put into a donation canister. They're discarded toys, so they don't have an identity. That's why they can't remember anything. And it's the horrible ringing bell that knocks them on their buzz up. That's the guy outside the bell ringing, donate your toys, donate your toys. It was engrossing, it was fabulous, and it was just 5 people in some crappy costumes that, nobody else was using down there in wardrobe. And that was it, So, how important is setting then? If we can tell an engrossing story that endures and lives on through the generations like that, is it? I just, I have to ask myself how important is the setting then? And maybe I should just be worried about my characters and deal with that, and ultimately setting me down. One of my favorite things on KPBS, I haven't seen it in a dog's life since, but talk about Greeks. You remember something called the Endless War? No? It's like 2 guys in blue officers' uniforms. They're the Spartans. And there's 2 guys in khaki uniforms. They're the Athenians. And then there's some other guy in a white uniform. He's from Syracuse. And it's talking about the political struggle that they're going through. And it just cuts back from these 2 guys to these 2 guys to these 2 guys. And there's nothing in the background, just these 2 guys in these kind of like funky, almost World War I outfits.
I'm pretty sure they got it all worked out now.
Yeah, but it was, and this was historical. They were really talking about, it sounded like, what reminds me of it now is the way that the Democrats talk about the Republicans, you know what I mean? And, these guys, they're twisting each other's words and they're twisting each other's lines. If you can find this doggone thing, I don't know where you go. It came out about the same time as I, Claudius. You guys remember that? Yeah. And it's called the Endless War. And it's just, and you hear it and say, damn, this could be the Soviet Union and the United States. It could be Islamists in the United States. It could You know, it's just the universality of it, the verisimilitude of it was incredible. And it's just some guys in some uniforms in a featureless room. There's not even a freaking plant in the background or a picture on the wall. And they're just talking about their human situation. And it's engrossing. You can't look away. And I don't know where you can find it. If you can find it, I mean, that should be a real lesson to you. You know, the endless war. Isn't that the human condition, endless war?
I guess as long as you get your audience to empathize and somehow relate in a individual way to your characters, you're winning. It's not so much about the environment.
If you truly care about it, you can get them to care about it.
Right.
You'll find the language if you care about it. You know.
The Immortals, I think, was shot the same way that 300 was shot, with no sets at all and everything digital.
Well, it's not that there's no sets, and that was something actually Tarzan fought for and was always trying to get more money for. It's that it's all shot on stages. We never spent a day outside. It was all at Mel's in Montreal. Well, what he would do, because he thought it was very important, because he said, listen, I can do any job on a set, but the one thing I can't do is act. That's hard. And you have to give the actors a sense of physicality and a sense of space to work with. So every set would be real, say up to like 8 feet or 10 feet, and then it would be green screen above it. Or if these if the characters are on the side of a hill, where they are, the fire is real, but then the view all the way to the right, that's all green screen. So it was a really smart combination of the two. And the one thing, I mean, I can't even say what the real budget is, but it's not what they say it is. And when you see it, you're just like, whoa, he did that with that money? So that's the one great thing, is that you can do so much now with technology. It is amazing. You know.
Yeah, and as Charlie said too, I think people that hopefully will go see the film will be surprised by the scope of the film, just how big it looks and the aesthetic that he was able to maintain. But what I just wanted to mention, I agree with Mark. You know, character and emotion trumps everything. That's the reality. But that's more for a movie. I think as a writer, it's important for you to spend time, do your homework on your setting, because I think that it will translate on the page. And there's nothing worse than reading a script where it just doesn't feel real. And I would also add that if someone has done their homework, as Sid Fields says you should do your homework, has really thought it through on a character level and on a setting level, that will come across on the page. And I think it's even more important at the script stage for you to pay attention to that and really know what you're talking about. And again, it does come down to being passionate about what you're saying. But at the end of the day, character and, I think, emotion trump everything in a movie. And obviously, if it's in your story, the same applies. But take time with that, in my opinion.
Yes, the gentleman right here.
This is more of a philosophical question. In your writing and your creativity, do you believe that we're in control as human beings, and are we alone?
So I guess the question is, as writers, are we in control?
No. Human being.
Are human beings?
How does that affect your creativity? Are we alone? Are we in control?
Alone? You mean alone in the universe?
In the universe, yes.
I don't know. I haven't figured out any of that stuff just yet. but I will say that in writing, you know, we were talking about this before. I feel it's one of the few arenas where you get humbled by. You just go into a process trying to find a story. I have come to believe that the story, it's the reason it kicks your ass every time. You get better at the craft of it, but you never get to a point where it's easy or it just kind of falls out. You know, the story, you go into a journey of telling a story. I think you humble yourself in that the story exists in some perfect form, and you're trying to excavate it. I kind of have come to believe that you're kind of trying to channel a story. It is bigger than you. It is 50 times more intuitive and complex than you. You're just trying to grab what you can of it. And what I find in a real spiritual sense, writing is that you kind of give yourself over to this process, and you realize you're not in control of it. So in terms of, it really teaches me, at least in life, that you're not really in control. You're just trying to kind of plug into something that is natural, and you're trying to sort of weave your life through it. But it's bigger than you. It's totally bigger than you, and it's can you discover it more than can you wrench it into being like you think you're God making your stories. No, you're just really trying to capture something, and I feel that I would answer the questions. No, we're not in control, but we can kind of we can by telling stories and creating worlds, we can get some sense of being more in tune with the universe, because I think that's all we're trying to do is find these eternal things. We're trying to ferret them out of all the crap and chaos of life. We're just trying to get something simple and true and elemental, and it's incredibly hard, and it's bigger than you, is what I keep coming back to. It's just, it feels like you're trying to see behind the curtain and figure out what's really going on in the universe, and that's what a good story does. But to get to the simplest thing, I don't know about you guys, I find it the most difficult and the most passionate, intense, challenging thing is to get to a simple truth through a story. And so, no, we're not in control.
Are we alone?
You tackle that.
See, my take on it is, when I'm nice and high, the world is magical. Every thought I have reminds me of it. Water is made of hydrogen and oxygen, two odorless, colorless gases. You put them together and they're wet. What the hell is going on there? Everywhere I look, sight, what a miracle. We've got it built into our goddamn cameras now. But just the whole idea that a message from afar in great detail is being carried to me by this thing called sight. There are times when I've been high enough, I've watched the walls take a breath. They inflate, and I'm dumbfounded. And I give it close scrutiny. And I'm very, very skeptical. But the wall is taking a damn breath. No question about it. And from time to time, I feel the weightless hand of Rod Serling patting me on the back. Well done. I believe in the idea of spirits, and afterlife, heaven, hell, more to come. I believe there's more going on right in front of our eyes here than we give it credit for. I know I blot out at least half of everything by just ignoring it. I only remember things I give my attention to, but anything I really give my attention to, I never forget. My brain, inside, consciousness. If you did not have consciousness, you would not believe it. Nothing about it makes any damn sense. Consciousness must be God. The universe is probably very conscious. Information must be out there, not in my brain. My brain's just a device for accessing it. But it's floating by in great morphic clouds. God is in his throne, and all is right with the world. You're absolutely one of a goddamn kind. You are absolutely unique. If there weren't millions and millions of us, you would stare at yourself in astonishment. But you take it for granted because it seems to be a commonplace that things are alive. But think of that word alive. It's alive! What the hell is he saying? It was dead. And that's not dead anymore. Life is a palpable thing. It comes, it goes. Your body is limber and moist and slick, and then suddenly it's hard and cold and dead. And what the hell went on there? And what can that possibly mean if there isn't a hell of a lot more going on than meets the eye? Because both life and death are totally inexplicable, unexplainable. People have always, in every society, invented God. What a peculiar idea that is, that there's some ancient being who in some way encompasses all of us throughout interstellar space that goes forever in that direction and forever in that direction, forever and forever, and it's speeding up. Our scientific Johnnies tell us the damn thing is speeding up. Hell, I can tell that. the older I get, the faster a week clicks by. Now, I don't need science to let me know what's going on, because I truly believe that there are other beings. Whether they're visiting us now, I don't know. But they could. Good God, the sheer geometry of it. Suns spin off planets. This planet used to be part of the sun. You're a phantom, fashioned from the goddamn sun. Where the hell did you come from? Who intended all of that? Sure, Darwin talks about everything, but who invented life? Where did life manage to creep into the first little thing, if Mr. Darwin is at all right? Because I think that the caveman was just as smart as you. He just had less information to work with. But now you've got access to just about total information. You are a god in every respect. Only you're so many of you around here, you keep forgetting that you're one of a kind.
You know, the one thing I would add, because you touched upon that we are a consumption-based society now. We're no longer hunter-gatherers. We no longer live off the land. We're not farmers. And there's so much emphasis that we live in this kind of frenetic, caffeinated world. Go spend, money, go here. Someone calls you on your cell phone. If you're a writer, you need quiet, undivided time where you can just be with your own thoughts. And I think the way the world is structured now, that becomes less and less of a reality. So just remember that you need that time to think and have ideas, and that's important, and that's part of the process. Don't write on a computer that has internet if that's a distraction. Like, give yourself that time to think and have quiet solace.
No.
But don't become cynical. And our society now is just it's good to be cynical, but don't become apathetic. Be enthusiastic about what you're writing. Believe in it. Be excited, even if you have to lie to yourself, because it's hard work. And so don't let that happen. It's a very solitary thing, sitting at a computer trying to create something.
Yeah. Or don't be cynical, be angry. Yeah, one thing, a really good technical note, one of the greatest programs I have on my computer is this thing called Freedom. It's a free download. And it runs on, I think it actually runs on both Macs and PCs now. And you download this program and you run it. And you say, I would like 120 minutes of freedom. And you put in your code, and then it kills your internet connection. The only way you can get it back. No, and I'm serious. It's so funny, because this thing saved my life. Because, of course, I will research until I die. Like, I will just, the invention of the internet was, destroyed me. And then I actually saw in an interview with, Nora Ephron, where they're like, what's the advice you'd give to young writers? She's like, there's this program called Freedom, quite literally. Everyone should have it on their computers. But that also brings us back to, it's funny. There is this very ineffable part of the process of writing. It's the thing I hate the most about it, which is that you really aren't in control of it. And conjuring that moment of play, it's exactly right. You will go out of play mode so fast if you are worried about the stock market, and you're worried, you're reading all these different articles, and then you're reading Deadline Hollywood Daily and wondering about this and that, and it just puts you into that sort of very left brain, very beta wave kind of mode. And the thing I find so toweringly mystical and strange is that, last Wednesday night, I had one of those dreams. I'm totally asleep, and I dream an elaborate dream that involved, I'm a different person, I have a different name, I know all these different people. Everything is just concrete. It's not one of those dreams where and then I was a bird, and then there was a train and stuff. It's no, it was a whole other world, completely created, very detailed, a different history, a different life. I lived in a different city. Everything was so very, very real. And when I woke up and tried to write it all down, it is really astonishing what our brain does, what our brain can do. And in the moments when you're actually connected to that is when the really good writing happens. And the thing is, that's the hardest thing to get to. And you do your best to create that space. But I think that there are two kinds of writing self-help books, because I've read them all at this point, that all deal with writer's block and things like that. And to me, there's sort of two kinds. There's one that says, don't worry about inspiration. No one gets it. Just type up some words and whatever. And that's, on the one hand, very, very true. But I also really, I love this woman, Linda Berry, who wrote a book who's sort of about, no, you really do need to be in connection with something. You really do have to look at what it means that when you're 8 years old, you can tell a story to anyone. You can come up with anything. It just flows. It's very, very simple. And as we get older and older, that getting to that place can be very, very hard. But that actually, it's very important. It's at least very important to me in my writing. And it's also, it's the hard part. But anyway, that's just to get to the point of, are we in control? I think that's the fucker.
Are we alone? As the Star Trek guy on the panel, I think a lot about aliens. And if you look at some of the stuff I write, what I think kind of creeps in there. And I look at the Earth and I look at ourselves as clues to what's out there and what may come. Because I feel like laws are universal. You know, hydrogen here acts the same way as it does in Procyon, as it still does in another galaxy. And so I tend to think that maybe life forms all act the same too. So I'm thinking that space is a lot like my junior high school cafeteria. There are all kinds of kids in that room. There are good kids, there are bad kids, goofy kids, kids who are totally out of it, kids like us who are endlessly gazing into our own navel lint, you know, because we're so self-absorbed, and that just barely under control. And that one day we may wake up and long for those days when we were innocent and alone. And I hate to think that we may one day wake up and find ourselves Indians in a galaxy full of cowboys. I mean, this has happened before. I mean, advanced technology is not a guarantee of gentle human considerate nature, as we've seen. And I like to, you know, Gene Roddenberry's Star Trek, wonderful. You know what I mean? It's probably pretty utopian. And I think that just like on our Earth, once again using an example, there are extremophiles everywhere. Life is where we couldn't imagine it to be. It's at the bottom of the oceans where no sunlight prevails, and it's based on other molecules, you know, that have nothing to do with what we thrive on. And it's living in the bottom of glaciers, you know, in Antarctica, where this has been alone for millions of years. And I think we're going to find out that life is abundant and everywhere. And it's staring back at us. And I think the only reason that maybe, I know this is crazy, but I'm putting this actually into a script, but I think the only reason that we haven't been overrun and, you know, so far is because maybe this is kind of like a wildlife sanctuary, and the only guys we've contacted so far are poachers, and you know, and somebody out there is kind of keeping things under wraps until we're quote unquote ready. You know, I don't think we're ready now, but one day, you know, they're gonna fire up the origins interferometer, you know, and we're gonna be able, if life is on other planets, we're gonna see it with our naked eyes. We're gonna see it. We're gonna look out through this thing, and we're gonna, if there are cities on other planets, there won't be any more questions. We'll see them, okay? And we may be startled to find out that when we look out into the universe, it's staring right back at us. Kind of goofy, kind of wild, I know, but that's what I really think.
All right, we have time for one more question. You, sir.
Yeah, I was really going to pitch a question to Mark, especially with Children of Men. I know we touched on the idea of, I think we all prefer that creative, original screenplays, original ideas, but studios are certainly more interested in adaptations and pre-sold franchises. Especially with Children of Men, I mean, what was the process like that started to make that for you? When did that first happen? Because the book is so different than what came out on the screen.
So just to repeat the question. Yeah. So being that Children of Men being such an unusual, different project, what was the process of developing it in a studio environment?
Yeah, that was our second writing assignment, and we had just done this adaptation of A Scanner Darkly, which was a Philip K. Dick novel, and we kind of got a reputation for doing the in-between genre the ugly ducklings that someone called them, the neither here nor there. No one knew what the hell they were. But we wrote, Scanner Darkly as the French Connection, kind of make a drug movie out of something while keeping Philip Dick's voice intact. Kind of the way, when you look at the way Blade Runner evolved into the movie, it's a different animal from the story, certainly, but it's very much the same soul. So Children of Men was in the, kind of in the broken, going nowhere pile, and here we, we're very inexpensive new guys, and they gave us a crack at something. It wasn't one of those books that anyone was chasing, so naturally they gave it to us because it was something that could be cracked maybe, and we pitched it as we read the book, loved it, felt it wasn't a movie, and I think they were afraid it wasn't a movie, but what we saw in it was Casablanca in terms of the give a relationship to the two main characters, where the woman who broke your heart and tore your heart out, and you have the most painful history with, basically comes back to you after a long absence saying, I need you to help me to do something larger than us, larger than our pain, our past, and it's to help essentially save the world. And very much like Rick in Casablanca, he has to get over his own, you start off with someone who's really dead inside, and I just knew at the end of this movie, I want to see that guy essentially, bleeding out, dying to save mankind, and so we pitched it as Casablanca, which is never a terrible movie to drop in a pitch meeting, and got them to see that, opened it out as a road movie, as an adventure story, but mainly about the final movie took sort of softened the sort of third side of the triangle, the Laszlo character, where the it wasn't so much a romantic triangle, but the main thing was that it's the person who hurt you the most is now coming back to you and asking for your help to do something larger than the two of you, larger than everything, which turns out to be the way to unlock, which was the sci-fi concept, and that was the absence of future generations. It was a slow dying out of mankind as opposed to the meteor hitting the earth. It's the painful, slow knowing that mankind was dying, and the dying of hope over many, many years, and the agony that would cause society. So, but to activate that idea, you needed a character, you needed something to seize with the potential of that story and make them feel it. Otherwise, like the book, it's a beautiful story, but it's a heady story, it's very internal, it's very sort of an intellectual idea, the loss of hope, but you do it as a love story, you do it as a way of bringing that drama through ordinary people's eyes, and so that's what got us that job, and we wrote it, very much the way the movie came out. There were other writers after us, and Cuarón did a beautiful job bringing it to life, and making, like we said, the setting. He created. We all wanted a world where it wasn't a sci-fi world per se. It was a normal, shitty, dying, atrophying world. But in that backdrop, you really what made the movie happen. Well, it's an impossible story that movie ever got made. But Alfonso was coming off Harry Potter and said, I want to do that movie, and that was one of those things of timing where you have a hot director who just made the studio like truckloads of money and is allowed to do an $80 million art film. Doesn't happen too often. So a lot of happy accidents and a lot of stars lined up to make that movie happen. But the main thing was, I think we're proud of the contribution of making it taking it from being an intellectual idea story, concept story, and making it an emotional story, and saying what would it feel like for the world to be dying that slowly and that gradually, and have hope going away, and then put it through the eyes of two people who have lost hope themselves and have lost hope from they're the ones who have wounded each other, and that made the studio say, oh yeah, this is a movie. It's not a book. It could be a movie, and that kind of got it to Alfonso, and from there, became a film. So the advice I would say is that came out of it for us was, you find the stories that you love, and that we really responded to that book, and that's why we chased it. We weren't there were a lot of other cooler assignments, so to speak, out there, but that one we spent a lot of years fumbling around trying to write our own Blade Runner to kind of rip off the magic of that movie, and then one day you trip over something, you say, we can do our what we care about through P.D. James's novel. We can try to do that kind of a story that's from us, not trying to rip off some other movie's magic, but we can take ourselves, weave it through her world, and come up with something that started the process of becoming Children of Men. So it was about following your heart. Ultimately, that's what led us to go after that book.
On that note, I'd just like to ask if the panelists would like to have any final words for the audience.
I just think anytime that, we read a script or hear about something that's, just recently sold, we always say, oh, we should have thought of that. And that's kind of the hook you need to have. Like something where, oh, that's just a great idea for a movie, or that's a great story. When we first started off, we wrote things that we knew, personal stories, things that we had lived. And I think that's how you start to evolve, when you first start writing. You start to write what you know, and then you learn to put what you know and who you are into bigger things that are more interesting to people beyond the scope of your family. So, be conscious of that.
I'd like to make a comment also. Just a final note. If I were offered a chance to be one of the secret masters of the universe, I think I'd turn it down, because I've already got the best job there is. And I think that's what you guys should know about your profession. It's the best job there is. Movies are made by writers. He mentions P.D. James. Without James, this whole thing that he's talking about isn't there. It came out of one person's head, one person's imagination. It became in one art form. It got transferred to other art forms. But basically, you guys are in the position of being terribly important, not only to others. I've had old ladies come up to me, and there are tears in their eyes, telling me that there's this story about the old lady and Mr. Death, how much it affected them. And I look into the raw emotion just churning inside of these people that they can't explain why it is that a short story happening on a screen more than 50 years ago is that important, that compelling. But it is. And so you guys really do have a chance to become really the elite, a form of royalty, if you will. Most people couldn't write one short story and ever get it published. But if you ever get a short story published, that places you above your peers. People around you look at you and they wonder, how the hell did you do that? It wasn't even that distinguished a magazine, but it's such a marvelously impossible achievement to get your name in the papers. Now, you guys have an opportunity to do that, and I would be inspired to strive to get a larger view of what it is that you do, because in many ways, I create the future. One brief comment. I consider myself a cultural revolutionary. I believe that wherever popular culture goes, the law will quickly follow. Witness all these dispensaries for pot out there. What people do. Now, what people do comes from the ideas they pick up from the atmosphere. Part of the atmosphere is the movies. Part of it is television. Part of it is stories and magazines and articles, essays and things. And what you do is terribly important to people. And they will remember it for years and years and years if you can reach out and touch them somehow. And you only can reach out and touch them if you are them. If you really go within yourself to look for your humanity, and in some way, through science fiction or otherwise, put it out on the page, you will have accomplished something so magnificent, your life will not have been in vain. I certainly don't feel that mine was.
One of the great Hollywood moguls of history, I can't remember who it is, it might have been Louis Mayer or somebody like that, said that The writer is the most important person in the creative process. And that is why we must never let the bastards know it. But that being said, I always remember that, and I talked a lot about following your own heart, damn the torpedoes full speed. But civility counts for a lot in this industry. Remember, we're in a collaborative industry, and I'm always reminded of that by the craft services table on stage 8 at Paramount, where the Star Trek bridge set was. That there was a banged up coffee machine, looked like it'd been there from the 60s, and taped to it was a stained 3x5 card, spot marked with coffee from the ages. And on that card said one of the wisest things I've ever heard in this business. It said, "Be careful of the toes you step on today. They may be connected to the behind you'll have to kiss tomorrow." Be nice.
A lot of wonderful stuff has been said. I don't want to follow this. All right.
So thank you all for coming. I'd like to have a big round of applause for this amazing panel.